Yes, one Chinese official described me as a demon. So then when I first heard that, my response is, yes, I'm demon with horn.
In a recent live appearance, the Dalai Lama shared a deeply emotional moment that quickly made headlines and stirred confusion. Soon after, reports began to spread claiming he had resigned. But is that actually the case? What did he really say? And what does it mean moving forward? Join us as we take a closer look at the truth behind the viral moment and what it could mean for the future of Tibetan Buddhism and its spiritual leadership. Historical and institutional background. Since 1587, the institution of the Dalai Lama has played a central role in both the spiritual and political life of Tibet. The third Dalai Lama, Sonam Gyatso, was the first to receive the title formally, and from that point onward, each reincarnation assumed not only the highest spiritual authority in Tibetan Buddhism, but also served as the head of the Tibetan government. This fusion of religious and political leadership defined the Tibetan governance model for centuries. The Dalai Lama became both a symbol of spiritual guidance and the ultimate decision-maker in matters of state, representing the unity of the Tibetan people under one authority. This tradition of dual leadership endured through invasions, periods of isolation, and significant political changes. The role of the Dalai Lama continued to evolve, but remained at the heart of Tibetan identity. The fifth Dalai Lama further institutionalized this combination of roles, moving the government to Lhasa and establishing a theocratic administration supported by monastic and lay officials. Subsequent Dalai Lamas inherited both the responsibility to lead the people in spiritual practice and to manage diplomatic and administrative affairs. In the 20th century, these responsibilities became even more challenging. The political role of the Dalai Lama came under intense pressure following China's assertion of control over Tibet in the 1950s. In 1959, the 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, led the Tibetan people, establishing the Central Tibetan Administration in Dharamshala. However, a significant transformation occurred in 2011 when Tenzin Gyatso voluntarily stepped back from his political role. This marked the first time in over 4 centuries that the Dalai Lama would no longer serve as the temporal leader of the Tibetan people. Instead, he transferred full political authority to an elected leadership. This shift was not sudden, but the culmination of decades of gradual reform. Since the 1960s, the Dalai Lama has supported democratic practices among Tibetans in exile, including the creation of a constitution, the establishment of a parliament, and the holding of regular elections. By formally retiring from political duties in 2011, the Dalai Lama affirmed his belief in the separation of religion and politics. The move signified a modernization of Tibetan governance and aimed to ensure long-term stability and democratic representation for Tibetans around the world. It also demonstrated a forward-thinking approach to leadership in which spiritual guidance remains distinct from political administration. While the Dalai Lama continued to serve as the spiritual heart of the Tibetan people, governance was placed in the hands of elected officials who could carry on the administrative work in his absence. This decision represented a profound institutional shift in the history of the Dalai Lama's role. Let's tell you something very interesting about the current Dalai Lama that many people don't know. Dalai Lama turning 90. On July 6, 2025, the 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, turned 90. This significant milestone drew attention from across the world and became a moment for deep reflection on his long life, his era of leadership, and the services he has provided to both his people and the global community. As one of the most respected spiritual leaders of the modern era, the Dalai Lama's 90th birthday was not just a celebration of age, but a tribute to a lifetime of peace, compassion, and resilience. The 14th Dalai Lama was born in 1935 in a small village in northeastern Tibet. He was recognized as the reincarnation of the 13th Dalai Lama at the age of 2. His early life was shaped by intensive monastic education, and he formally assumed full political power in Tibet during a time of great instability. In 1959, after a failed uprising against Chinese control in Tibet, he fled to India and established a government in exile in Dharamshala. Since then, he has lived in exile while continuing to advocate for the rights and cultural identity of the Tibetan people. Over the decades, the Dalai Lama has become a symbol of nonviolent resistance and moral authority. His approach has consistently focused on peaceful dialogue, mutual understanding, and compassion. He has traveled extensively, spreading messages of love, forgiveness, and global responsibility. Through countless speeches, writings, and teachings, he has reached people of all faiths and backgrounds, promoting a universal message of human values. In his era, he has provided several key services to the world. First and foremost, he has been a spiritual guide to millions of Buddhists, offering teachings that emphasize mindfulness, compassion, and inner peace. He has also played a vital role in preserving Tibetan culture and religion, especially after the occupation of Tibet. Under his leadership, Tibetan communities in exile were able to rebuild monastic institutions, schools, and cultural centers. Another major contribution of the Dalai Lama has been his promotion of interfaith harmony. He has consistently met with leaders from various religions and encouraged mutual respect among different belief systems. Additionally, he has emphasized the importance of secular ethics, urging people to cultivate kindness and understanding regardless of their religious beliefs. Celebrations for his 90th birthday were held in Dharamshala, India, where he has lived for decades. The events included special prayers, public gatherings, and cultural performances. Thousands of followers, including monks, nuns, government officials, and supporters from around the world, gathered to honor his life and legacy. The city became a hub of devotion and gratitude as people reflected on the immense impact he has had over the last 9 decades. The moment marked not just a personal milestone, but a celebration of hope, resilience, and unwavering commitment to nonviolence. The Dalai Lama's 90th birthday served as a powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit and the enduring influence of a life dedicated to peace and compassion. On his 90th birthday, the Dalai Lama expressed a surprising hope that caught the attention of many around the world. Reassurance of continued service. Dalai Lama expressed a surprising and heartfelt wish to live beyond 130 years. This declaration was more than just a comment about longevity. It was a powerful reassurance to his followers that his spiritual mission was far from over. At a time when many were wondering about the future of his leadership and the direction of the Tibetan community, this statement brought comfort and renewed confidence. The Dalai Lama's wish to live past 130 years was deeply connected to his unwavering commitment to compassion, peace, and spiritual guidance. He has long believed that the purpose of life is to serve others, and he sees his own existence as a vehicle for promoting kindness, understanding, and inner peace. By expressing his desire to live well into his later years, he signaled that he still has much to give. His teachings on compassion, mindfulness, and the importance of inner values have inspired people all over the world. His continued presence, he believes, is necessary to guide not only Tibetan Buddhists, but also the wider global community seeking peace and clarity in a fast-changing world. He did not speak about this hope as a fantasy. Instead, he shared that he believed living such a long life was possible through the power of peace of mind and a disciplined spiritual life. The Dalai Lama has often talked about how mental calmness, healthy habits, and positive intentions can contribute to longevity. His life has always been rooted in daily meditation, simple living, and a deep sense of purpose. For him, these are not just teachings for others, but practices he lives by. He believes that by continuing this path, one can extend both the quality and length of life. Apart from this surprising wish, the Dalai Lama made a surprising declaration. Let's tell you what it was. Succession Declaration. Breaking years of uncertainty and quiet speculation, he confirmed that there will be a successor after him. He will be reincarnated. This announcement brought clarity to a topic that has been debated both within and outside the Tibetan Buddhist community for many years. For quite some time, there had been uncertainty about whether the current Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, would be the last to hold this sacred title. Some had feared that the ancient practice of identifying a new Dalai Lama might end with him, especially given the political tensions surrounding Tibet and the growing interference of outside forces in religious matters. However, with this new declaration, the Dalai Lama put those doubts to rest. He confirmed that the tradition of reincarnation will continue and that his spiritual lineage will not be broken. He made it clear that the next Dalai Lama will be identified only after his passing. This follows the long-standing Tibetan Buddhist tradition in which senior monks and scholars search for the next reincarnation based on spiritual signs and tests. This process, rooted in centuries of religious practice, involves looking for specific clues, visions, and qualities that match those of the previous Dalai Lama. The child believed to be the reincarnation is then recognized and trained to continue the teachings and responsibilities of the role. His words carried the weight of history. Tibetan Buddhism has always placed importance on the reincarnation of enlightened beings to continue their work for the benefit of all. The Dalai Lama's decision to publicly confirm this process for himself once again reaffirmed his dedication to his faith, his people, and his responsibilities. Along with this surprising declaration, let's now tell you how the Dalai Lama explained the complete process of succession to make sure no confusion was left behind. Succession process and authority. Following his declaration that he will be reincarnated, the Dalai Lama went a step further to eliminate any remaining doubts. He clearly outlined who will oversee the sacred process of identifying his successor and how it must be done. According to his statement, the responsibility for this task lies with the Ganden Phodrang Trust, an organization created by him. This trust will have full authority in the search for the next Dalai Lama after his passing. The Ganden Phodrang Trust is not a random selection. It holds deep significance within the structure of Tibetan Buddhism and the legacy of the current Dalai Lama. It was established by him to serve as a spiritual and cultural institution capable of safeguarding the principles of Tibetan Buddhism. By assigning the duty of finding his reincarnation to this trust, the Dalai Lama ensured that the process remains in trusted and spiritually committed hands. This move also guarantees that the tradition will be followed with authenticity and deep respect for Tibetan customs. The Dalai Lama emphasized that the process of succession must follow historical precedent. He insisted that Tibetan Buddhist authorities alone have the knowledge, training, and spiritual insight required for such an important responsibility. This includes high-ranking monks, scholars, and spiritual leaders who understand the signs, rituals, and traditions passed down over generations. These religious figures will look for spiritual indications, visions, and other sacred signs that point to the presence of the next reincarnation. In traditional Tibetan Buddhist practice, the search begins after the death of the current Dalai Lama. Senior monks may meditate and seek visions or signs that lead them to a specific region or family. A young child believed to be the reincarnation is then tested using personal belongings of the previous Dalai Lama. If the child can recognize these items or respond in ways that align with the former Dalai Lama's qualities, the child may be confirmed as the next in the spiritual line. The Dalai Lama made it very clear that no external party has any right to interfere in this process. He directly rejected the idea that governments or political entities could influence the search. His statement was firm and direct. Only Tibetan Buddhist authorities can determine the next Dalai Lama. This message was likely aimed at preventing political manipulation, especially in light of past attempts by outside forces to influence Tibetan religious practices. Then comes the most important part of the Dalai Lama's announcement, a message directed straight at Beijing. You must be wondering what it is. Let's tell you. Message to Beijing. As part of his recent announcement on succession, the Dalai Lama delivered a strong and clear message to Beijing. He urged the Chinese government to refrain from any involvement in the process of identifying his reincarnation. His words were not just a spiritual statement, but also a bold political move. He made it absolutely clear that any attempt by China to interfere would be considered illegitimate and against the traditions of Tibetan Buddhism. The Dalai Lama stated that only the Tibetan Buddhist community and its spiritual institutions have the authority to recognize the next reincarnation. This declaration aimed to protect the spiritual process from outside political influence. It also reinforced the idea that the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama is a deeply religious matter, guided by centuries of tradition and spiritual understanding. According to the Dalai Lama, any claim to control this sacred process by a political authority would go against the true principles of Tibetan Buddhism. In response, Beijing made its position equally clear. The Chinese government insisted that the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama must take place within the borders of Tibet and must be approved by the state. China's claim is based on its control over the region and its desire to manage religious affairs as part of its broader governance policies. This firm stance reflects the government's ongoing effort to assert control over all aspects of Tibetan life, including spiritual matters. The Chinese government has already demonstrated its intention to influence Tibetan religious practices in the past. It has previously appointed its own Panchen Lama, a spiritual figure who also plays a role in identifying the Dalai Lama's reincarnation. This move was rejected by many Tibetans, who continue to follow the Panchen Lama chosen by the Dalai Lama himself. With this background, the current disagreement over the Dalai Lama's future successor appears to be part of a larger conflict over religious authority and cultural control. Analysts observing the situation predict a possible outcome where two separate individuals may be identified as the next Dalai Lama. One would be recognized by the Tibetan community in exile, following the spiritual procedures laid out by the Dalai Lama and his trust. The other could be appointed by the Chinese government, based on its own standards and approval process. This would create a complex situation with two claimants to the same title, each backed by different powers and accepted by different groups of followers. Such a development would further deepen the divide between the Tibetan exile community and the Chinese state. It would also raise serious questions about the future of Tibetan Buddhism and the unity of its followers. The Dalai Lama's firm message to Beijing was therefore not just about protecting tradition, but also about preserving the spiritual independence of his people. Recently, news has been circulating about the Dalai Lama's resignation, but it's high time we tell you the reality behind it. News about Dalai Lama resignation. Rumors have been spreading recently suggesting that the Dalai Lama has resigned due to his age and the growing weight of his responsibilities. Some reports claim that at 90 years old, he has stepped down from his spiritual duties, unable to continue guiding his followers. These rumors have gained attention across social media and news platforms, leaving many of his supporters confused and concerned about what's next. However, these claims are not true. The Dalai Lama has not resigned from his spiritual role. In fact, his recent 90th birthday celebration offered a very different and reassuring message. Instead of stepping back, he expressed a strong desire to continue his spiritual mission well into the future, possibly even beyond the age of 130. His clear and confident statements showed that he remains committed to serving humanity and guiding his followers through compassion and peace. The birthday announcement made it clear he is still very much present, active, and determined to carry on his work. Now it's high time to analyze what will be the repercussions of the Dalai Lama's recent announcements. Geopolitical repercussions. Within the Buddhist world, the announcement has deepened divisions over the rightful authority to recognize the next Dalai Lama. By stating that the Ganden Phodrang Trust will oversee the reincarnation process and rejecting external interference, the Dalai Lama has drawn a line that many see as a challenge to China's authority over Tibet. For followers of Tibetan Buddhism, this reaffirmation of spiritual independence is seen as an important defense of religious integrity. From a political standpoint, Tibetan exile leaders quickly backed the Dalai Lama's position. Penpa Tsering, the former head of the Tibetan government in exile, strongly condemned Beijing's history of interfering in Tibetan religious matters. He reaffirmed the right of Tibetans to manage their spiritual affairs without foreign control. According to him and many others, the authority to select a reincarnated Lama lies solely with the Tibetan people and their monastic institutions. Beijing, however, has dismissed the process outlined by the Dalai Lama and his trust as illegal. Chinese officials maintain that any reincarnation must be approved by the state and take place within Tibet. This stance reflects China's broader effort to control religious and cultural life in the region. By insisting on government approval, China aims to ensure that any future spiritual leader aligns with its political interests. These opposing positions have increased diplomatic friction between the Chinese state and Tibetan leaders in exile. Analysts now warn that the situation could lead to a scenario in which two individuals are declared as the next Dalai Lama, one recognized by the Tibetan exile community and another chosen by the Chinese government. Such a divide would not only confuse followers, but also further entrench the political and cultural conflict surrounding Tibet. What are your thoughts on the Dalai Lama's announcement? Share your opinions in the comments below.